So, I was going to start off by saying I want to make this video because of X, but I don't think that's the right choice of words. Because, in large part, I don't want to make this video. I feel compelled to make this video. The reason I don't want to make this video is because the things I'm about to talk about are not held in high regard today. They're laughed at, they're mocked, and those perpetuating them are insulted. Not to mention the fact that I don't completely understand them myself. I can't defend them in every aspect. And so, also I'm not someone who likes attention, and I don't really want to be on social media. I try to keep a low profile. All of that combined, I really don't want to make this video. And the fact that I am should, well, I would say show you, but you don't know me. I mean, I could be lying for all you know, but I mean, assuming that everything I'm saying is true, it should demonstrate how compelled I feel. How compelled pushed I feel to make this video. Not of my own desire, but I feel like I should, because and I really can't tell if it's a spiritual push, a push from, let's say, God, or if it's just that I've collected these pieces of information that I've thought are very compelling and useful, and it's taken me a long time, over the course of years, that it's taken me to collect these pieces and put them together. And I'd like to share it. I know part of me would like to share that with people. I don't want it to be lost with me. And it's not that other people don't know this and haven't done the same thing. I'm not trying to say that. And this isn't about me being arrogant. And again, anyone can say that, but I really don't want social media presence, and I don't want attention. I just want to be left alone. But I think that these things would be helpful for someone who's searching, sounds so cheesy, but someone who's looking into these things and trying to find answers and is having a difficult time. I could save them a lot of time by just sharing what I've found, and take it as you will, or leave it. If it's not compelling to you, that's totally fine. It was to me, and that's why I'd like to share it. So, I guess I'll get started. So, through much of my life, there are people that live on manual and people that live on automatic. And I am someone who lives on manual. I cannot just go with the flow and just believe what everybody else believes and just live how everyone else expects me to live without thinking about it and questioning it and thinking, is this the correct thing, the correct path? Why am I here, and what's my ultimate purpose, and how do I best fulfill that? Those are some of the deepest questions that I've had. And they sound few and simple. And they're simple enough to ask, but they're not easy to answer. And so it's hard to get it's been hard for me to start my life and go down a path with enthusiasm without having some of these answers in place. And that sounds like a tall order, because those are some of the deepest questions there are. And I think maybe I've stumbled on some of them. Maybe they were handed to me. I don't want to disregard that, and I don't want to be disrespectful if they were provided to me because of my seeking. I don't know that that's the case. I don't want to sound ridiculous. I know that will to some people. But I want to be grateful and appreciative, and I want to spread it, pass it forward to anyone that might find it useful, like I said. And so, when searching for a life philosophy or what this all means, obviously I grew up in Christian America, where it was actually much more Christian than it is right now. And I fell out of believing in the biblical stories because not very many people could tell me what they meant. I read them in English. I didn't read them in Hebrew or have any of that context. And so a lot of it just didn't seem like it made sense. It honestly started seeming like foolishness to me. I got to a point where I just felt they were pretty good rules to live by, but the spiritual aspects of it just sounded not likely historically true. So I searched, and I looked into philosophy and psychology, and I tried searching through the Bible as best I could. I went to what I thought were the most authentic, original sources. I wanted to look into the Jewish context of the literature, because these are Jewish stories ultimately. And I understand that's debatable in some regards, but it's mostly Hebraic, Jewish stories and written in Hebrew. But I guess I'll start with psychology. I did a lot of looking into Sigmund Freud, which led me to looking into a really interesting character named Edward Bernays, which is his nephew. And then eventually, roundabout, I got to Carl Jung, which I didn't hear a lot about him. Every now and again I'd hear a quote of his, and I thought that sounded really profound. Really, really profound. And so I was like, man, this guy sounds very smart. But I kept hearing bad things about him from others. People would just bash him in the field all the time, and say that he was a crackpot and a quack. And anyway, so I didn't really read into anything, and I know it's definitely not what I should have done. But I didn't look into him like I should have, just because of what other people had said. Instead of reading his own words myself, which is easily accessible. So I started reading Carl Jung, and some really interesting things happened. And really interesting things that I can't explain, and they did happen 100%. I'm actually embarrassed to talk about them because it sounds fake. It sounds like a made-up story. but it 100% happened exactly as I'm saying. So to make kind of a long story shorter than it could be, I've taken the Myers-Briggs test. A lot of you guys are familiar with that, I'm sure. And I've always come up intuitive. Every time intuitive. And so it's a personality test. And so anyway, this may be why Carl Jung, his work resonates with me so well. It's said that he resonates well with people that are intuitive, so maybe it won't for other people. But anyway, I was reading some of his work, and I had heard somewhere along the line, reading his work, listening to interviews with him and whatnot, videos about him, that you're supposed to, like, when you're reading Carl Jung, go ahead and take a notepad and paper and put it by your bed and write your dreams down and do dream analysis and try to see if you can figure out what your subconscious is saying. And I did that, and things started, and I had these bizarre dreams, and these dreams started making sense when I started remembering them and writing them down and then reading over it. It made a lot of sense. It was, to me, it was very clear it was my subconscious trying to tell me something. And it was correlating to things going on with my life. I won't get into too much of that, but there is one story I'd like to tell you. And that is, I had this one dream that I was in a dark tower. And it was like a castle tower, like the walls were all stone. And the room was very dimly lit with like torchlight or candles maybe. And my mom was there and I was there. And we were standing there talking. And my perspective was me watching myself talk to my mom. So I was not in my body, I was out looking like I was watching a video of me talking to my mom. Only my mom didn't have pants on, and so I'm asking her this question these questions that I actually have in real life. And I didn't know that I had this question, but I did. And it was about the feminine, I guess you could say. And I'm asking her these questions, and she's giving me the answer, and as she's talking to me, like I said, I'm watching this like I'm watching myself, a video of myself talk to my mom. So like I wasn't seeing through my eyes, if that makes sense. So I'm watching myself over there talk to my mom, and we're both in front of this mirror, and it's this big ornate gold framed mirror. And as I'm talking to my mom, it starts to pan, and I can see myself in the mirror. And then my reflection in the mirror, the me that's over there, isn't me. It's a female version of myself. I guess the best way I can describe it is, it looks like a female related to me, like a cousin or a sister, but I can tell that it's me if I were born a woman, if I were feminine, if I had been born a woman. And then all of a sudden I see this flash of light, and I wake up immediately after getting the answer. And the reason I saw the flash of light is because I was talking with my hands in the dream, and I was talking with my hands in real life while I was sleeping, and I thumbed myself in the eye when I was talking, and I woke up. And so the dream was fresh in my mind, so I was able to write the whole thing down. The funny thing is, this crazy thing, the next day, the portion of the book that I was reading by Carl Jung was about the anima. And what the anima is, it's the component of your psychology that represents the feminine. And it said in this book that it would present itself as either a sexualized version of you, or it would depict yourself as a female, or I'm sorry, a sexualized version of your mother, or a female version of yourself. And so, here's the thing, 1,000%, I know a lot of people would say, well, you read that before. No, I didn't. 1,000% I had the dream first, and then I read that portion of Carl Jung's book, and it was the next day, the very next day. So the day I woke up, that was the day of the reading, after I had the dream. So I have an encounter with the anima in my dream, and then I read about the anima, Carl Jung explaining it. The synchronicity in this is wild, and synchronicity is another Carl Jung term. It's just kind of what it seems like it is, what it sounds like. It's things that are just too coincidental to be coincidental. But I'll let you make up your own mind about that, whether you or not you think it's a coincidence, or what. But it seemed highly improbable that was the case to me. It seemed like it would take less faith to just say there's something going on here that I can't explain. So anyway, I had that dream. It was really interesting, and then I have a conversation with someone later on in my actual life, not in a dream, but my real life, and it's the same conversation that I had with my mom in the dream. So I had that dream, and then I woke up, and then in my real life I'm having the same conversation with somebody else. And the person is giving me the answer that I was asking for in my dream. And I'm like, wow, this is crazy. So anyway, I'm talking to the person, they give me the answer. And then they walk away for a minute out of the room, and I look over, and there's this giant gold-framed ornate mirror that I'm looking into. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the same conversation that I had. The exact same conversation that I had with my mom in the dream. Now I'm having it with this person, and the mirror is here too. It was so strange. And so anyway, to me, that blew my mind. I hope it's not an underwhelming story when I tell it. I guess living through it, it just freaks you out a little bit more. It's just much more impactful. It really shook me. I didn't know what the heck was going on. I knew that it was something significant. I did not take that as a coincidence. It was just, I think it would have almost been kind of ridiculous to take that as a coincidence. All that is a coincidence. It's so improbable. Okay, so anyway, so that happens. And So there's a big part of Carl Jung's, I guess, what would you call it, his psychological theory that's really important to know, and it's called the what is it called? Not the synchronicity, we already talked about synchronicity, but individuation. Individuation is a really important and deep concept, and basically what it is, to try to put that in a nutshell is kind of difficult, but basically what you do is Carl Jung talked about all these different components of your psyche that were kind of living within you. Living might be a wrong word, but that were within you. And they kind of were like their own little personalities. Your job is to discipline yourself in a way that you align all of those and balance out all of those different components of your psyche, those different personalities. And they line up properly and balance properly so that the true self, as Carl Jung would put it, which is another component of you, it's the truest form of you, the deepest true, can then live through you and permeate your being, and so that you can live as authentically and truly as you possibly can. And something really rings true about that to me. And this is where I started seeing links between this psychology and the Bible. It started looking like Carl Jung's psychology was just a secularized religion. It's secularized biblical religion. And I hope that makes sense, but basically it's the same thing it's the same thing as religion, only through a scientific lens instead of a religious lens. It's a way of being, the proper way. It's the way that we are destined to be, that we're supposed to be, and that you can go astray from that, and you can do that at your own detriment. And that heed is given in the Bible, and it's also given through Carl Jung's work in psychology. Anyway, so that brings me to the biblical stories and how that kind of intertwines, how that unfolds, and how individuation and Jung's theories kind of intertwine with that. And so I would say that in the story of Abraham is a character, and not to go into this, it's kind of hard for me to know what to edit out and what to go into detail with, because I know that people may be just kind of familiar with these stories, but I've done a lot of reading and listening to lectures by rabbis and people that commentate on these stories, these biblical stories, that look into it in the ancient Hebrew context, in the ancient context, and in the original language. And the way you lose a lot not doing that. You lose a ton. But I'll just say that it seems to me that Abraham is a man that was going through Jung's individuation process. He was disciplining himself, and that's clear from the biblical text. He's trying to set himself right. He's disciplining himself, and he's trying to listen to his true self, which is, I think, the same thing as God. His deepest, truest self. That still small voice within him. No matter how much he doesn't want to or how difficult it is. That true self that tells him the proper direction. He's trying his best to submit to that, and follow through with it. And he's going through the individuation process. In fact, there was a biblical lecture given by, and I'm sure a lot of people have seen this, whether you like him or dislike him, whatever, disagree with him or agree. I was listening to Dr. Jordan Peterson's lecture on the biblical stories, and about the portion where he was talking about, he was specifically talking about Abraham, and he mentions, and this was after I had already come to this conclusion myself, he mentions, for those of you who are familiar with Carl Jung, this is the individuation process that Abraham is going through. And I knew that, but it just validated it a little bit more for me. But to have someone that was a little bit more of an authoritarian on at least one of these topics confirm that. And Dr. Peterson is definitely an authoritative source on psychology, particularly Jung. So, an authority, I would say, rather. So that was interesting to me. I firmly believe that's the case, and I believe that psychology is secularized religion. And Carl Jung's psychology/religion is the biblical psychology, the biblical religion. And so anyway, to continue on with these stories, some very significant things happen in these stories. Some very interesting and significant things. And I have really tried to either confirm or I guess refute the biblical stories as hard as I can, so that I can be on one path or the other, and not just kind of stuck in the middle, because to me the middle seems the hardest place. I know a lot of people don't think that, and maybe for a lot of people that's not the case. For me, the middle is the hardest. If I could just know that it's true, or know that it's not true, I feel like my path would be much more direct. And to be honest with you, I'd prefer that it's true, to be completely honest. I want there to be a God, and I'm just being honest. But if there's not, I could come to grips, at least somewhat, with that. More so than just kind of sitting in an intellectual purgatory where you're just kind of hanging in between. To me, that's the most painful. So I'll go through a few things with you that helped me to, kind of, there were things that I just thought were very compelling and that I couldn't refute. So we started with Abraham, and I'll skip around a little bit, but to continue with him, Abraham had a son named Isaac, as you know, many of you know, and he was instructed to sacrifice his son Isaac at the altar, and he was to bring his son up Mount Moriah for the sacrifice. God was testing him to see if he would sacrifice his only begotten son for God, because that would be the ultimate test. The ultimate test of his completed individuation, that God was completely living through him and in control of him, that he would submit completely, and it would be this union between creator and creation, to where the creator was living through the creation, but the creation also had full autonomy. If that makes sense. It sounds like a contradiction, but it's not, if you think about it. Anyway, so Isaac, he's carrying the wood for the sacrifice up the side of the hill, and he doesn't know that he's the sacrifice. Isaac's the son again, Abraham's the father. And Isaac asks his father Abraham, "Father, where's the sacrifice?" And his father Abraham says, "God will provide himself a lamb." And I have heard a rabbi talking about this, and he comments saying that it's phrased a little bit strangely. It can be interpreted that God would provide himself as a sacrifice, the way it's phrased. But of course, a Jewish rabbi is going to interpret it another way, which is that God is going to provide a sacrifice himself. I just thought that was interesting that popped into a rabbi's mind at one point when he was reading that text, and had mentioned that in one of his lectures that I was listening to. Very interesting and very compelling. So they get up to the top of the mountain, or the hill, or whatever you want to call it, Mount Moriah, and Abraham ties Isaac down, and he's about to sacrifice him, and then he's stopped by a messenger of God, and he's told to untie his son, that he knows he would not withhold anything from God, not even his only son. And so God provides Abraham with not a lamb, like it says in the text, but a ram, which I think is very interesting. God did not provide a lamb like he had said, and he did not provide himself the lamb, or himself as the lamb, I guess you could think of it in that way. He provided a ram. So Abraham unties Isaac, sacrifices the ram. God is satisfied. His creation was willing to sacrifice even his only son to him. He was willing to sacrifice everything, including his only son, for his creator, which is a beautiful story. And the Jesus story is the mirror image of that story. And there's a lot of foreshadowing in this story to that one. And the mirror image is that God in turn sacrifices himself as his only begotten son, and as the lamb, as the sacrificial lamb, meaning the offering for atonement and forgiveness on the Day of Atonement, which is the day that Jesus was crucified, the Hebrew Day of Atonement, God's holy day. And it goes further, that God was also sacrificed, Yeshua, Jesus, was sacrificed, killed, crucified it's believed that he was crucified on Mount Moriah. Several people believe this theory. The same mountain, the same area that Abraham sacrificed Isaac